DJ, you go crazy.
Can you give us though like a history lesson? I just want to shift gears real quick. A history lesson on the relationship between Elijah Muhammad and Malcolm X.
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, to put in the proper context, both men come from the Garvey movement.
Okay.
Malcolm X's father, Earl Little, was a division president for the Honorable Marcus Garvey in Lansing, Michigan, I believe. His mother, Louise, used to write articles for Marcus Garvey's Negro World. This is the largest, most circulated black newspaper of all time. And the paper was so revolutionary that if you got caught with it in Africa or the Caribbean, it could land you in jail for life. It could lead to a public whipping. And in some cases, it could lead to your execution. So Malcolm's mother used to write for the paper. Malcolm's father was actually murdered during the work of the Honorable Marcus Garvey. And it was Malcolm X's father, Earl Little, who wrote to President Calvin Coolidge during Garvey's incarceration, demanding his release. Malcolm X's father helped lead the charge for the exoneration of the Honorable Marcus Garvey. So Malcolm, although he was a young child, he still remembered his life in the Garvey movement because he wrote about it. There's books where Malcolm actually talks about how the meetings were, the things that he learned, and what his father taught. So when Malcolm met Mr. Muhammad, that organization was very close to the organization that his father had built. And Mr. Muhammad himself, having once been a follower of the Honorable Marcus Garvey and pledged allegiance to the red, black, and green flag, because if you was a member, you had to do that. When he founded the new organization after Garvey's deportation, much of the structure of the organization was borrowed directly from Garvey. So Garvey had the Universal African Legion that became the Fruit of Islam. Garvey had the Universal African Black Cross Nurses that became the MGT. The divisions became MOS, so forth and so on. In fact, when Mr. Muhammad started the early organization in his youth, he used many of Marcus Garvey's quotes to help gain the attention of people. Because remember now, this was the largest black organization in modern history. The leader is gone and America ain't letting them come back. You see that? So everybody who came with an organization post-Garvey used Garvey's words to help attract Garvey's followers to the new organization. I believe the unfortunate split between the two men was largely due to the fact that Malcolm wanted to participate in the Black Revolution freedom struggle. Okay. Malcolm was sitting back. He's watching SNCC. He's watching CORE. He's watching the sit-ins. He's watching the freedom movement. He's watching the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. He's watching the Deacons for Defense. He's looking at all these black organizations fighting for justice, freedom, liberation. Some were integrationists, some were nationalists, but they were fighting. And Malcolm didn't feel his organization was doing enough to participate in the black freedom struggle. And I think that was a major reason for that split. Malcolm wanted to do more than just talk. He wanted to struggle for black people.
So where do you say Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. fit in the midst of all this?
One of the big ironies, contradictions between the integrationists, Honorable Frederick Douglass, militant integrationist, Dr. King, nonviolent integrationist, Malcolm X, nationalist, or even if you look at Mr. Muhammad and his organization, one of the criticisms that has always been levied against the nationalist community, for all y'all talk, y'all haven't produced for the black community what the integrationists have. Frederick Douglass helped get us a 13th Amendment, a 14th Amendment, a 15th Amendment. Dr. King helped get us a Civil Rights Bill of 64, a Voting Rights Act of 65, a Fair Housing Act of 68. That's 6 pieces of major legislation from 2 integrationist leaders. What have y'all gotten us on the nationalist side? I would partially concur to an extent that the nationalists have to do a better job of counting victories and achievements. We're good on rhetoric, good on the message, good on the platform, good on the principle. But when it comes to measurable gains for African people outside of the Honorable Marcus Garvey, of course, and a few other nationalists, they really haven't achieved much. You see that? So most people are going to go with whoever puts the bread on the table. The integrationists put bread on the table. The nationalists, not as much. For me, Dr. King is a hero. Some people say, Dr. Umar, how in the hell can the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. be a hero to a revolutionary Pan-Africanist. He wasn't focused on Africa. He wasn't about fighting the white man. You know why Dr. King is one of my heroes? I don't judge my heroes based on ideology. You feel me? I might get my associates and soldiers based on ideology. We ain't struggling unless you're a Pan-Africanist. But my heroes is based on their sacrifice for the people. Dr. King gave his life. Dr. King did not have to do what he did. Dr. King was born in a well-to-do, famous family. His father and grandfather were well-known preachers. Dr. King could have been a T.D. Jakes. Dr. King could have been a Creflo Dollar. He did not have to put his life on the line for black people. His house got bombed twice with his wife and kids in it. The average Negro would have gave up then. Dr. King said, nah, I'm not giving up. So people can criticize Dr. King all they want. Who else got their house bombed twice and stayed with the movement? These Negroes don't even want to donate to a movement, much less risk their life for it. Dr. King struggled for us. And even though he's considered nonviolent, when they went up against them dogs and them hoses, ain't nothing nonviolent about getting bit by dogs. You know, there was elders who got their breast bit off. The dog bit the breast off. Dr. King went to jail over 100 times. The nationalists wasn't going to jail for black people. They were talking shit while Dr. King was struggling. You see that? So for me, can't nobody say nothing to me about Dr. King. He wasn't perfect, but guess what? He's the last leader. He's the last leader in Black America to give you a serious, comprehensive plan for systemic change, politically, socially, and economically. Jesse Jackson ain't done that. Al Sharpton ain't done that. Nobody you can name has done anything even close to Dr. King, and we 55 years since he was murdered. So can't nobody say nothing to me about Dr. King. Every time I go to Atlanta, as much as I can when I'm in Atlanta, I go to Dr. King grave and I sit there and I get my sage out and I burn it and I talk to Dr. King, him and Queen Mother Coretta Scott King, because in my position with what I'm trying to do, I'm picking up where he left off, not with the integration. I'm coming another way with the nationalism. But Dr. King had a little Pan-Africanism because after Malcolm got murdered in 65, Dr. King goes to Jamaica. He meets with the Garveyites in Jamaica. He visits Marcus Garvey's gravesite. And they give him a thorough education on what Garveyism is all about. Dr. King said Marcus Garvey was the first black man to give our people a large, serious movement for change. And when Dr. King came back from visiting the Garveyites in Jamaica, he started sounding like Malcolm. He started sounding like Garvey. Listen to Dr. King the last year of his life. He ain't preaching no damn integration. He preaching Garvey. When Kwame Nkrumah led Ghana to its independence on March 6, 1957, who was in that audience in Ghana celebrating the independence of the first post-colonial state? Dr. King and Coretta. He wasn't out with his Pan-Africanism, you feel me? But Dr. King had a space in his heart for Pan-Africanists, and he was definitely influenced by Garvey because the last year of his life, he was talking Garveyism, and that's why they had to die. Dr. King didn't die for integration. Dr. King died for economic revolution. The reason Dr. King was murdered, after he left Memphis, he was on his way to Washington, D.C. The Southern Christian Leadership Conference was spearheading a breadbasket campaign. He was taking poor people of every color, but he was taking poor people to the nation's capital. Nobody was leaving unless they left with a job and a house. And Lyndon Baines Johnson and J. Edgar Hoover lost their mind. They said, if you let this Negro come to the nation's capital with all these poor people from across the country and erect a tent city and nobody leaving without a job or a house, it will embarrass this country and might lead to social revolution. Dr. King is the first man since Marcus Garvey, the Honorable Marcus Garvey, in my opinion, who damn near brought America to its knees. That's why they killed him. Not for integration, but for economic liberation.
And it just made me think about, how the FBI killed Fred Hampton here in Chicago.
Oh, yes.
He was just 21 years old.
Yes, 21 years. And to show you, well, first of all, always look at the timing of the murders.
Right.
It ain't just the murder. It's the timing.
Right.
Sam Cooke is murdered a few weeks before Malcolm. Sam Cooke, first black major artist to own his own publishing. Close friends with Malcolm and Muhammad Ali and Jim Brown. Sam Cooke, rumor has it, was going to finance the new civil rights movement. Once King and Malcolm came together, Sam Cooke was going to finance. He had to die. You're not going to finance the black liberation. He died in December 64. Malcolm is killed in February 65. You know why Malcolm had to die from the government side? Malcolm was supposed to keynote a Third World Revolutionaries Conference with Che Guevara in a couple weeks. The U.S. government could not afford Malcolm X and Che Guevara to link up with all these African revolutionaries and Caribbean revolutionaries. Malcolm had to die February 21st to stop him from getting to that revolutionary conference with Che Guevara. You see that? Dr. King had to die on April 4th to make sure he never gets to the breadbasket campaign. Fred Hampton had to die December of 69 because Fred Hampton just came. He was part of the Black Panther Party Central Committee. He was one of the leaders. Huey and Bobby and the rest of the Black Panther Party Central Committee had just elected Fred Hampton to be the national and international spokesman for the movement. As you know, he was the best of their orators. You see, could you imagine with Fred Hampton as the international spokesman for the Black Panther Party? The U.S. government couldn't have that. Fred Hampton was our last great hope after they murdered King. Remember, they killed King April 68. They killed Fred Hampton the next year, December 69. Fred Hampton was going to be the next great black leader. He had to die right then and there because if they would have allowed him to build the momentum as a new international spokesman for the Black Panther Party, who knows where we would be right now. You always got to study the timing of the murder. There's a reason why he dies now, not a little bit earlier, not a little bit later. Yeah. And then after they take out Fred Hampton, 2 years later, George Jackson, Soledad brother, who just started a chapter of the Black Panther Party, in the prison, although he was co-founder of Black Guerrilla Family, he started a Black Panther Party chapter in prison. And that was part of the reason I believe they had to kill him because he was politicizing the prisoners. He was doing that anyway. But now he had the support of the Black Panther Party, the most popular grassroots organization at the time. And that's why they set George Jackson up for murder. So look at that. Medgar Evers 63. I'm going to go back to Africa. Patrice Lumumba 61, who I believe is the greatest Pan-Africanist since the Honorable Marcus Garvey in the Congo. Patrice Lumumba 61. Medgar Evers 63. Malcolm 65. King 68. Hampton 69. George Jackson 71. In my opinion, when they killed George Jackson on August the 21st, my birthday, but I'm not born in 71, I'm later than that. But when they killed George Jackson on my birthday, I believe that was the metaphorical and symbolic end of the Black Liberation, Black Panther Party era. However, I was wrong because what happens in 71? Black Liberation Army is born. You feel me? So at the decline of the Panthers with the murders of Fred and George, the Black Liberation Army takes off. And the Black Liberation Army, which was more aggressive than the Black Panther Party militaristically because they stood up to the cops. They went toe-to-toe with the cop. They bust Assata Shakur out of prison in New Jersey and got that sister to Cuba. You feel me? So we got to make sure we study our Black Liberation Army history. Everybody know the Panthers, but what about the BLA who came after the Panthers, who kept the torch going, you see? And then in the early 1980s, most of them are either assassinated by the police or incarcerated. And that's when the U.S. government said, we can't handle more of this. You got to realize, the 1960s and 70s, we damn near brought America to its knees. Do you realize from the 60s to the 70s, specifically, I'm going to go 55 to 75 more specifically, right? Mm-hmm. From 55 to 75, you had more legitimate Black revolutionary organizations fighting for our people's freedom than any time in history except for slavery. Could you imagine being J. Edgar Hoover? And I don't want you to imagine being him. Right. You wake up every day, you got a new group. You got Stokely Carmichael over here. You got H. Rap Brown over here. You got Malcolm over here. You got King. You got the Freedom Riders. You got the sit-ins. You feel me? Black Panthers, Black Liberation, Deacons for Defense. Bro, we almost did it. And how did the government respond? They said, we need a weapon that could shut all this shit down. And you know what they came up with? 1980, CIA dropped off crack cocaine. Boom. Chemical warfare. 1983, U.S. government drop off HIV, AIDS. Boom. Biological warfare. Crack and AIDS was sent into the Black community to prevent the rise of another Black messiah after the deaths of Malcolm, King, Fred Hampton, George Jackson, and the Black Liberation Army.
DJ, you go crazy.